What's up guys, SamWickert here, and I'm going to be showing you how to do reflections in 3ds Max with an HDRI image. Now before we get started, I'm going to explain what an HDRI image is. It stands for High Dynamic Range Imaging. An example of it would be here with a common photo. We have just a photo outside, but you can see the sky is very blown out, and that's not how we saw it when we were going to take the image. What we saw was everything equally exposed, and it was a high dynamic range of different exposure levels. So to be able to capture what we saw on our camera, what we can do is take multiple exposure levels, as you can see down here, and bring them into Photoshop and blend them together to get a realistic result. So we're going to use this technique to create an image to map on the inside of a sphere. So let's get started. So obviously the first step in this process would be to get the images for the HDRI, but for reflections is a lot different than the example I just showed you because we need to capture our entire scene. So to do this, which is where it gets a little bit weird, so bear with me, we're going to use a gazing globe, which is one of those spheres people use in their gardens. If you think about it, the sphere reflects the scene around it. So if it's captured on camera, we can then reverse it to map it on the inside of a sphere in 3ds Max. The gazing globe I use is 8 inches in diameter, but they come in a ton of sizes, and you can check them out on Amazon. Be sure to check the link in the description. So I set the gazing globe in the middle of my scene, and I balance it on a tripod, and then I set the camera up to be viewing the globe dead in the center, and I backed up far away, put my zoom lens on my DSLR, and set my camera to take raw images, and set it to the bracketing function so it would take 3 photos of exposure, which were -2 exposure, correct exposure, and then +2 exposure. And then I repeated that exact same process to have a total of 6 different photos, and it ended up having 360 degrees of coverage of the scene. So we now have the 6 images, and what we're going to do is we're going to create an HDR out of the sets. So this set of 3, and then this set of 3. And that totals in 360 degrees because this first set of 3 is 180 degrees of the sphere, and then this is the opposite side, the other 180 degrees of the sphere, making 360 degrees of the environment. So we're going to head over into Photoshop. We're going to choose File, Automate, Merge to HDR Pro, and then we're going to choose Browse, choose the first 3, OK. Make sure Attempt to Automatically Align Source Images is checked, and then click OK. Alright, so we now have this window pulled up, and we can see the image, and you want to make sure that the mode is set to 32 bits, and then we can move this slider over, and we're going to just choose our best judgment, and we're going to decide what looks equally exposed. I'd say right there looks good, and then what we're going to do is we're going to press OK. Now this is down at the bottom, so you may not be able to see this. Alright, so now we have the image. So now we have the HDR image, and what we need to do now is crop it so that only the sphere fits on it. So we're just going to drag the crop tool out, and ideally we want it to just touch the sphere at these points so we can have it fully take up the photo. Now right here where the tripod touches the sphere, you just want to pretend as though you don't see that and imagine where it would hit it. So I'd say right about there. Alright, now that looks good. So we can right click now, choose crop. Alright, so we now have it cropped, and then what we're going to do is we're going to save it out. And you want to make sure you choose radiance, .hdr, and select save. Now you're going to want to do the same process for the other set of 3, and then we're going to move on to unwrapping the image. So here we are now in HDR Shop, which is a free program, so check the link in the description to download it. And we're going to drag in our 2 halves that we just made from Photoshop. And we'll minimize the second one, and we can right click and zoom out to view the photo. And now what we need to do is unwrap this. So we're going to choose Image, Panorama, Panoramic Transformations, and then under the destination image we're going to change the format to latitude/longitude, and then we're going to click OK. So here we have it now unwrapped, and this is exactly what we want. So we're going to move that out of the way, exit out of the old one, and we can now maximize the second one. We're going to do the exact same thing. I'll just zoom that out so you can see it, and we are now going to click Image, Panorama, Panoramic Transformations, back to latitude, longitude, OK. And now here are the 2 images that we need to save out. So we're going to take the first one, and we're going to choose File, Save As, Radiance, Now we're going to save out the second one as well. Alright, And now we are going to take those images, we're going to move back into Photoshop where we will stitch them together and clean them up just a little bit for our 3ds Max reflections. So here I am back in Photoshop, and I'm going to drag in the images I just saved out. So here's the first half. I'll unlock the layer and also drag in the second half. And I'm going to right click and place. So then I'm also going to increase the canvas size so I'll have more work room. So I'm going to select image, canvas size, and change this to about 25. Now I'm also going to zoom out so I can see everything, and I'm going to also right click on the second half and choose rasterize layer so I can work with it. I'm going to move the second half over, and I'm going to put the first half on top of the second half. Now we need to find a point where we can loop it so we can stitch them together, and that'll be our house. So this point right here in the house should work perfect for looping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to cut out the second half from that point on, and then I'll press delete. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate by pressing Alt and then dragging it up, this other half, and I'm going to move it over, and this will allow me to loop it. And I can lower the opacity as well. Now I can grab the eraser tool and blend these together. And then I'm going to also need to go in here and chop it off right there on this side. A little bit more, and it should work perfectly fine. Alright. And now what's left is that I need to move this piece over and blend it in. So I can lower the opacity. Right there looks good. Turn the opacity back up. Grab the eraser tool and blend them in. Now I'm going to crop the image. Right click, crop. Now I can select all the layers and flatten image. Now you may not see that. And I can also unlock it again. So now what we need to do is we need to clean up our image. So as you can see, we still have the little bits of the tripod in there, and you can also see me taking the photos. So I'm going to grab the clone stamp tool. I'm just going to press Alt and grab a little bit over here and paint it in. Alright, and that should work. So here we have the complete image done, and what we're going to do is we're going to select File, Save As. Again, we're going to save it out as a Radiance file. And next we're going to be moving into 3ds Max where we will complete the tutorial. So we're finally here now in 3ds Max where we can finish up the tutorial and actually see some results from our HDRI. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Rendering, Render Setup, and we're just going to make sure that we have mental ray selected. If you don't have that, the default is actually scan line, and you can change that if you'd like. So mental ray, it's right here. And then we're going to go to Rendering, Environment, and we're going to check Use Map, click None, Bitmap, find the HDRI image, click OK, and then we're going to click Rendering, Material Editor, Compact Material Editor, and we are going to drag this into one of the empty slates, Instance, okay? And we're going to change it to a spherical environment, and then we can also go under Views, Viewport Background, check Use Environment Background and Display, okay? And now we can see it back there, and you can move around, you can see our environment. And that actually is what my backyard looks like. So HDRI is working perfectly, you can see it now. And what we can do now is we can create an object. So just make a sphere just like our gazing globe, and then we can make a very reflective material, say chrome. So we can just go in Arc and Design under Mental Ray and choose chrome, it's down at the bottom, and drag it on there, and then set up some lighting. So we can go to Systems, Daylight, drag that out, and it was November 24th at about 4 o'clock, and we live on the East Coast, so right there. Now just rotate this around to where the direction of the sun, and then you also want to set the sunlight to Mental Ray Sun, and set the skylight to Mental Ray Sky, and then click render, and we can see that we have reflections now, and it looks very realistic. It looks exactly like the actual gazing globe did. And when you render this out, you won't actually see this background of the environment right here, so you have to worry about that for transparency. And that concludes the tutorial. Here's an example I made by motion tracking a gazing globe in there and just a cloth simulation. You can see the environment and the realism of it, and the realism of the reflections. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them below, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Check links in the description, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of new content. Thank you.